She built the success of others, while dimming her own light for love and friendship. But it only took one moment, a betrayal, for everything to crumble before her eyes. Instead of revenge, she chose reconstruction, with documents, courage, and a purpose. And as she stepped onto the stage with her son in her arms, she silenced the world with her truth. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. Marina had always known she was different from other women. Not by her appearance, not by the way she dressed or spoke. She was different in the way she saw the world. While everyone else sought the spotlight, she preferred the creative shadows, that place where ideas were born without the pressure of outside gazes. At 32, she had built an empire that didn't bear her name, and that never bothered her. Or at least that's what she repeated to herself every morning, waking up in the spacious house in Chelsea, London, where she lived with her husband Robert and little Gabriel, who had just turned 1. On that December morning, the suffocating heat of the city contrasted with the anxiety Marina felt in her chest. Christmas was just 3 days away, and she had planned something special. Not just a dinner, but a double celebration. After all, December 25th, besides being Christmas, also marked 5 years of marriage. 5 years that, in her mind, had been built on a solid foundation of companionship, respect, and love. Robert was an architect, working at a renowned firm in Canary Wharf, and had always been the kind of man everyone admired. Handsome, eloquent, charming. Marina considered herself lucky, or so she thought. She was 7 months pregnant. Her belly was already heavy, and her movements had become slower. Gabriel, for his part, was at that stage where he wanted to be held all the time, and Marina divided her days between diapers, bottles, online meetings, and the endless strategy spreadsheets she created for Victoria's company. Victoria Alston, the name that shone on all the billboards on Oxford Street, in business magazines, at corporate events. Victoria was the CEO of Alston Strategies, a marketing consultancy that over the past 5 years had become a national benchmark. What no one knew, what no one ever suspected was that behind every victorious campaign, every killer strategy, every flawless presentation, was Marina. They had known each other since childhood. They had grown up together in the Islington neighborhood, attended the same school, shared secrets, dreams, and disappointments. When Victoria decided to open the company, it was Marina who structured the business plan. It was Marina who secured the first clients. It was Marina who created the visual identity, the positioning, the essence of the brand. But Victoria had something Marina thought she lacked: presence, charisma, the ability to walk into a room and make everyone turn to her. And Marina, generous by nature, believed it was fair. After all, true friends complement each other, they don't compete. Or so she repeated to herself whenever she felt a slight unease seeing Victoria's name emblazoned on accolades that should have been shared. That afternoon of December 22nd, Marina decided to leave her home office early. She had bought all the ingredients to prepare the surprise dinner: turkey, stuffing, Greek-style rice, glazed ham, French toast, all made with her own hands. Robert loved her French toast. She smiled, imagining his expression when he got home and found the table set, the candles lit, Gabriel dressed in the new Santa outfit she had bought days earlier. It would be perfect. She picked Gabriel up, put him in his stroller, and went down the stairs of the townhouse. The doorman greeted her with a somewhat strange smile, as if he wanted to say something but didn't know how. Marina didn't notice. She was too focused on the surprise she was about to prepare. She placed Gabriel in the back seat of the car, fastened his car seat belt, and drove down King's Road towards the supermarket. The afternoon was hot, but the sky was beginning to darken with heavy clouds. It looked like it would rain. Marina hoped it wouldn't. Rain in London always meant traffic, and she wanted to get home with enough time to prepare everything before Robert returned from work. She did her shopping quickly. Gabriel was restless, wanting to grab everything from the shelves. Marina laughed, redirected, negotiated. A first-time mother, she was still learning the art of infinite patience that motherhood demanded. At the checkout, as the products were scanned, she received a message from Victoria. It was a photo of the two of them, taken years before, during their college graduation. The caption simply read a heart and the phrase, "Best friends forever." Marina smiled and replied with another heart. Victoria had said she would be traveling for Christmas, something about a resort in the Hamptons. Marina was a little upset that they couldn't spend the holiday together, as they had every year since childhood, but she understood. Victoria needed to rest. After all, she had been working so hard. She returned home with overflowing bags. Gabriel was already asleep in the stroller. She slowly went upstairs, balancing the groceries, her purse, her key, while her 7-month belly made every movement a challenge. She opened the door. The house was silent. Strange. Robert should be at the office until 7 in the evening. It was only 4:30 in the afternoon. Maybe he had come home early. Marina felt a wave of excitement. What a wonderful coincidence. They could prepare dinner together. She left the bags in the kitchen, took Gabriel out of the stroller, and placed him in the crib in the bedroom. He continued to sleep soundly. Marina returned to the living room, thinking of going upstairs to tell Robert she had arrived. That's when she heard it. A sound, a laugh, feminine, coming from the master bedroom on the 2nd floor. Marina felt her heart race. Maybe it was the television. Robert sometimes watched a series while working, but there was something about that laugh that bothered her. It was too familiar. She climbed the stairs. Each step seemed to weigh a ton. She didn't know why she was feeling that way. A strange sensation, as if her body knew something her mind still refused to accept. She reached the hallway. The bedroom door was ajar. The light was on. Marina pushed the door slowly. And her world collapsed. Victoria was there, wearing the pink silk nightgown Marina had received from Robert for her last birthday. She was sitting on the bed, on Marina's bed, and Robert was beside her, shirtless, with an expression Marina had never seen before. It wasn't guilt, it wasn't regret. It was irritation, as if Marina were the intruder in that scene. Marina couldn't speak. The words died in her throat. She stood there, paralyzed, holding the doorknob, while her mind tried to process what her eyes were seeing. It couldn't be real, it couldn't be true. Victoria, her best friend, since she was 7 years old. Robert, the father of her child, the man with whom she had built a life. There, together, in her bed. It was Robert who broke the silence. He stood up, picked up the shirt that was lying on the floor, and put it on with a disturbing calm. He looked at Marina coldly and said the words she would never forget. "You're invisible, Marina. You always have been. I married a shadow, a woman who prefers to stay behind everyone else, who doesn't have the courage to shine, who has no personality of her own. I needed someone to make me feel alive, and you never managed to do that." Marina felt her legs weaken. She leaned against the doorframe. Victoria also stood up, adjusted her nightgown, and walked over to her. There was no shame on her face. There was something worse. There was satisfaction. "Don't take it personally, Mary. Robert never truly wanted you. He needed a useful, quiet woman who would take care of the house, the children, his life while he lived. You were always good at that, being useful, but love, true love, he feels that for me." Marina finally managed to react. She took a step back, her hands trembling, her eyes filling with tears that she refused to let fall. She looked at Robert, hoping he would say something, deny it, apologize, show any sign of humanity. But he just looked away and said they needed to discuss the next steps, as if he were talking about a work project. Marina stumbled down the stairs. She went into Gabriel's room, picked the baby up in her arms, and held him tightly against her chest. He woke up crying, startled. Marina was crying now too, unable to stop. She heard footsteps coming down the stairs. It was Robert, and behind him Victoria, now dressed in one of Marina's outfits. Robert went straight to the point. He said he wanted a divorce, that he had already spoken with a lawyer, that Marina should leave the house that night, that he would keep Gabriel because an emotionally unstable pregnant mother with no structure was not fit to care for a child. Victoria added that it was best for everyone, that Marina could go back to her mother's house, compose herself, and then they would talk about custody. Marina couldn't believe what she was hearing. This couldn't be happening. Not on Christmas Eve, not while carrying a child in her womb, not with the person she considered her best friend. She tried to argue, but Robert was relentless. He said that if she didn't leave willingly, he would call the police and claim she was having a breakdown, that he had witnesses, that his mother, Mrs. Caroline, who lived on the upper floor of the townhouse, was already aware of everything and supported his decision. As if summoned, Mrs. Caroline came downstairs. The woman Marina had always treated with respect, whom she had cared for when she was sick, whom she had included in all family celebrations, looked at her with disdain and said it was best for her to leave without making a scene, that a real woman would know when she was being replaced by someone better. Marina felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. There was nowhere to run. There was no way to fight. She was alone, pregnant, with a baby in her arms, being expelled from her own home by people she loved. Robert went upstairs and returned with 2 suitcases. He threw them down the stairs. Some of Marina's clothes fell to the floor. He said she could pick up the rest later by appointment. Marina went downstairs, picked up the suitcases with difficulty, still holding Gabriel, who wouldn't stop crying. She looked one last time at Robert, at Victoria, at Mrs. Caroline. None of them said anything else. They just stood there, waiting for her to leave. Marina opened the door and went out into the street. It was starting to rain, a fine, cold rain that would soon turn into a storm. She didn't know where to go. She thought of her mother, but her mother lived in Croydon, and she couldn't get there in that state. She thought of a hotel, but she didn't have a credit card. Robert always handled the finances. She only had a few coins in her purse. She started walking down King's Road, aimlessly, drenched, with Gabriel crying louder and louder. The suitcases were heavy, her belly ached, her legs trembled. The rain was now falling heavily, and Marina could barely see. Gabriel started coughing, a dry, worrying cough. Marina panicked. He had a fever. She could feel the heat of his little body through his wet clothes. She needed help. She needed shelter. That's when she remembered Julia. Julia lived nearby in Notting Hill. Julia was her college friend, the only person who had always been by her side without asking for anything in return. They had drifted apart a bit in recent years, but Marina knew she could count on her. She walked 10 more blocks, carrying the suitcases, Gabriel, and her own pain. The rain didn't let up. When she finally reached Julia's building, she could barely stand. She pressed the intercom. Once, twice, 3 times. No one answered. Marina began to despair. She pressed again. Finally, Julia's voice echoed through the intercom. "Hello?" Marina tried to speak, but couldn't. She just cried. Julia recognized the crying and rushed downstairs. When she opened the door and saw Marina there, drenched, trembling, with Gabriel unconscious in her arms, she asked no questions. She just hugged her, took the suitcases, and led her inside. Julia turned on the hot shower, took off Marina's wet clothes, wrapped her in blankets, and put Gabriel in her own bed, covered and warm. She made tea, called a doctor friend, and asked him to come immediately. The doctor arrived in 20 minutes. He examined Gabriel and said he had early-stage pneumonia. He administered medication, prescribed antibiotics, and said that if Marina had waited another half hour, the situation could have been irreversible. Marina collapsed, not just from physical exhaustion, but from the emotional weight of everything that had happened. Julia stayed by her side all night, holding her hand, telling her everything would be all right, that she wasn't alone, that together they would find a way to overcome it. That night, as Gabriel slept beside her, breathing with difficulty but stable, Marina made a promise to herself. She would never be invisible again. She would never again allow anyone to treat her as disposable. She would never again depend on anyone to exist. She would rise from the ashes. She didn't know how. She didn't know when. But she knew she would rise again. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the streets of London and symbolically washing away the old Marina. The one who believed blind loyalty was a virtue, the one who was content to be a shadow, the one who thought love was synonymous with silent sacrifice. That Marina had died that night, and in her place, Someone new began to emerge. Someone who didn't yet have a name but who already had a purpose. Someone who would prove to the world, and especially to herself, that a phoenix is not just a metaphor. It's a promise. The promise that no matter how deep you fall, it's always possible to fly again. It's always possible to be reborn. It's always possible to become who you were truly meant to be from the start. A complete woman, visible, irreplaceable, free. The first few days at Julia's house were the most difficult of Marina's life. Gabriel quickly improved with the antibiotics, but Marina seemed to worsen every morning. She woke up crying, went to sleep crying, and spent her afternoons staring blankly, caressing her growing belly and wondering how she had ended up there, how she hadn't noticed the signs, how she had been so blind. Julia didn't pressure her. She just stayed nearby, prepared meals, looked after Gabriel when Marina had no strength, and repeated, whenever necessary, that she would get through this. It was on the 5th day that Marina finally managed to talk about what had happened. She told everything. From the moment she opened the bedroom door to the desperate walk in the rain, Julia listened in silence, and when Marina finished, she only said one thing. You need a lawyer, and you need proof. Proof. The word echoed in Marina's mind. She had nothing, or did she? That's when she remembered. The backup. About a year ago, Marina had created an automatic backup of all her work files to a personal cloud, separate from Victoria's company. It was just a precaution, something she had done almost without thinking, driven by an instinct she couldn't name at the time. But now it made sense. She grabbed her old phone, the one she only used for work, and that was forgotten at the bottom of her suitcase. She turned it on, waited, and accessed the account. It was all there, years of work, presentations with metadata that showed she was the author, emails exchanged with clients where it was clear that she was the one leading the negotiations, strategy spreadsheets, campaigns, case studies, everything digitally signed by her with dates, times, and traces that could not be erased. Marina felt something she hadn't felt in days. Hope. She showed everything to Julia, who immediately called a lawyer friend. The man came to the house the same day. Dr. Henry was a lawyer specializing in corporate and family law. He was about 50, with graying hair and a look that conveyed seriousness and competence. He analyzed all the files Marina had saved, took notes, asked for details about the company structure, signed contracts, and equity participation. Marina explained that, although she worked full-time for Alston Strategies, she was never an official partner. Victoria always argued that it was better that way because Marina preferred anonymity and didn't want to deal with bureaucracy. Marina had believed. She had trusted, and now she was paying the price. Dr. Henry was direct. He said Marina had a very strong case against Victoria. She could sue her for intellectual appropriation, for improper use of copyrighted material, and also claim substantial compensation. As for the divorce and custody of Gabriel, he assured her that Robert had no basis to claim emotional instability. Quite the opposite. A mother who, even in a situation of extreme vulnerability, sought medical help for her child and was now seeking legal protection was the definition of responsibility. He offered to represent her in both cases. Marina accepted, but said she didn't just want to sue Victoria. She wanted to build something. She wanted to prove that she was capable of existing on her own, with her own name, her own brand. She wanted the world to know who was truly behind those successful campaigns. Dr. Henry smiled. He said she was on the right track. But before building something new, she needed to resolve what was left behind. She needed to formalize the divorce, secure custody of Gabriel and child support, and also prepare for what would come after the lawsuits were filed. Marina spent the following weeks getting organized. Julia helped her open a new bank account, transfer the little money she had in a forgotten savings account, and even found her some freelance consulting jobs so Marina would have some income while the legal battle unfolded. Gabriel was fully recovered and, at 18 months old, was starting to take his first steps. Seeing her son grow healthy gave Marina the strength to move forward. Christmas passed, New Year arrived, and with it, Marina felt that something needed to change internally. That's when, while tidying the suitcases she had brought that rainy night, she found an old notebook. It was from her college days. She used to write reflections, plans, dreams. She leafed through the yellowed pages and found something she had written at 20, right after graduation. It was a letter to her future self. It read, "Future Marina, I hope that when you read this you are a giant woman. Not giant in the sense of famous, but giant in the sense of complete. I hope you have built something with your own hands, that you have loved truly, that you have been a mother if you wished, and that above all you have never let anyone diminish your light. If something went wrong, if you got lost along the way, remember, you were always strong, you were always capable, you were always enough. One day, you will be giant. And when you are, look back with pride, not bitterness." Marina read that 3 times. Then she read it aloud to Julia. They both cried, and then they laughed. Because, in some strange and painful way, that letter seemed to have been written exactly for that moment. Marina realized that during all those years, she had forgotten that version of herself. The Marina who dreamed big, the Marina who believed in her own potential, the Marina who wrote letters to the future because she knew it would be brilliant. That night, Marina made a decision. She wouldn't wait for the outcome of the lawsuits to start anew. She would start now. She picked up her laptop, opened a blank document, and began to write. What did she do best? Strategy. What did the world need? More women leading their own businesses. What could she offer? A path, a bridge between pain and reconstruction. The idea began to take shape. She would create a consultancy focused on empowering women entrepreneurs, especially those who, like her, had been betrayed, abandoned, silenced. Women who needed to start over, but didn't know where to begin. Marina would structure a business model that was accessible, humanized, and efficient. It wouldn't just be about profit. It would be about transformation. She named the company Phoenix Consultancy. The name was not just symbolic. It was a declaration, a promise that it was possible to rise from the ashes. Julia loved the idea and offered to help with the administrative side. Marina accepted, no longer alone, no longer invisible. Now, she would build something with transparency, with true partnership, with mutual recognition. She created a simple but impactful website. The homepage told her story, without names, but with the essence of pain and overcoming. It spoke about how she had been the mind behind a large company, how she had been betrayed, humiliated and discarded, and how she was being reborn. It offered 3 main services: strategic consulting for small businesses led by women, mentorship for entrepreneurial mothers, and a free program for emotional and financial support for women victims of psychological and financial abuse. She launched the website on a January afternoon. She didn't expect much, maybe a few hits, maybe 1 or 2 messages, but what happened surprised her. In 48 hours, the site had over 10,000 hits. Marina's story had touched people. Women from all over the UK began sending messages. Some wanted to hire her services. Others just wanted to thank her for having the courage to expose her vulnerability. And some asked for help, urgent help. They were in similar situations and didn't know what to do. Marina read every message. She cried with some, she laughed with others, and she replied to all of them. She created a support group on the messaging app where women could share experiences, ask for advice, and find a support network. The group grew rapidly. In 2 weeks, there were over 300 women, and Marina noticed something powerful happening. They weren't just supporting each other. They were transforming, they were being reborn together. It was at this moment that Marina received an email. It was from a large investment holding company, EB Capital, led by Edward Brennan, one of the most respected businessmen in the country. Edward was known not only for his financial success, but also for his ethical stance and for investing in social impact businesses. The email said he had read her story on the website, was impressed with the Phoenix's proposal, and would like to schedule a meeting to meet her personally. Marina couldn't believe it. She read the email several times, thinking it was spam or some scam, but Julia confirmed it was real. The email came from EB Capital's official domain. Marina replied, setting the meeting for the following week. She spent the preceding days preparing. She structured a presentation, organized the social impact data they had already generated, and emotionally prepared herself to be, for the first time, before someone who could change the course of Phoenix. The day of the meeting arrived. Marina was 8 months pregnant, but she didn't let that stop her. She dressed elegantly but comfortably. She brought Gabriel with her because she had no one to leave him with. Julia accompanied her for support. They arrived at EB Capital's imposing building in the City of London and were greeted by a friendly assistant who led them to the meeting room. Edward Brennan was there. He was about 45, with dark hair and a few grey strands, an intense gaze and a demeanour that conveyed both power and humility. He stood up as soon as Marina entered, greeted her with a firm handshake, and smiled at the sight of Gabriel. "You can let him play in the corner there," he said, pointing to an area of the room where there were some toys. "I always host meetings with parents. I know what it's like to balance work and family." Marina thanked him and sat down. Edward went straight to the point. He said he had read her entire story, that he knew Alston Strategies and always thought there was something special about that company. Now he understood why. He said he had also gone through a corporate betrayal years earlier, when his partners tried to remove him from the very company he founded. He had managed to reverse the situation, but the emotional scar remained. That's why when he read about Phoenix, he felt an immediate connection. Marina presented the project. She spoke about the numbers, about the social impact, about the expansion plans. But more than that, she spoke about the purpose, about how she didn't just want to create a profitable company, but a movement of women who refused to be invisible, who refused to be shadows, who refused to accept crumbs when they deserved the whole feast. Edward listened in silence. When Marina finished, he remained silent for a few seconds, as if processing. Then he said something she didn't expect. "I want to invest in Phoenix, but not just with money. I want to invest with structure, with a network of contacts, with mentorship. I want you to have everything you need to turn this into something giant. Because you deserve it, and because the UK needs it," Marina felt. Her eyes well up with tears, but she held them back. She thanked him. She asked about the terms, about the percentage of participation, about what the partnership would be like. Edward was transparent. He said he would come in as an angel investor with a minority stake, and that Marina would retain total creative and strategic control. He would be there only to support, to open doors, to ensure she had the necessary resources. Marina accepted. They closed the deal right there, with a handshake. In the following days, the lawyers would formalize everything. But at that moment, what mattered was the symbol. Marina had been expelled from her home, humiliated with nothing. And now, months later, she was closing a partnership with one of the country's biggest businessmen, not out of pity, not out of charity, but because she had value, because she had competence, because she was enough. When she left the building, Marina hugged Julia and cried. But it was no longer a cry of pain. It was a cry of relief, of gratitude, of rebirth. Julia smiled and said that this was just the beginning, that the best was yet to come. And Marina believed. For the first time in months, she truly believed that everything would be all right. In the following weeks, Phoenix began to grow exponentially. With Edward's investment, Marina was able to hire a small team, rent a shared office in Notting Hill, and structure marketing campaigns to reach more women. The support group now had over 1,000 participants. Consulting services were fully booked for the next 3 months, and Marina was being invited to give lectures at women's entrepreneurship events. The first lecture would be at a large business conference in London with over 1,000 participants. Marina was nervous. It would be the first time she spoke publicly about everything that had happened. It would be the first time her name would be on a stage, illuminated, visible. Julia encouraged her. She said she was ready, that the world needed to hear her story, and that, above all, she needed to hear her own voice echoing in a space where she would finally be recognized. Marina spent days preparing the presentation. It wouldn't just be about business strategies. It would be about resilience, about starting over, about the courage to become visible. She reviewed the slides countless times. She rehearsed in front of Julia, in front of Gabriel, even in front of the mirror. And when the day finally arrived, Marina was ready. She walked onto the stage, 9 months pregnant, carrying Gabriel in her arms because he didn't want to stay with Julia. The audience fell silent. Some whispered. Marina knew what they were thinking. Who was this pregnant woman with a child in her arms stepping onto a business stage? But Marina was unfazed. She smiled, adjusted the microphone to the right height and began to speak. She told everything, from her childhood with Victoria, through years of invisible work, to the night she was expelled from her home in the rain. She spoke about the pain, about the despair, about the moment she thought she couldn't get back up. But she also spoke about strength, about the decision to be reborn, about the creation of Phoenix, and about how in just a few months she had proven that it was possible to rebuild an entire life. When she finished, the audience was in absolute silence. Marina thought she had failed, that perhaps she had been too intimate, too vulnerable. But then one person stood up, then another, and another. And in a few seconds the entire audience was on their feet, applauding. These were not polite applause, they were applause of recognition, of respect, of admiration. Marina felt something she had never felt before. She felt that she was finally being seen, and not just seen, she was being celebrated. After the lecture, dozens of people approached her, businesswomen wanting partnerships, investors offering capital, women wanting to thank her for having the courage to expose her vulnerability. And in the middle of the crowd, Marina saw a familiar face. It was Victoria. She was there, at the back of the auditorium, with an expression Marina couldn't decipher. Fear, regret, envy. It didn't matter. Marina felt no anger. She felt no desire to confront her. She felt only indifference. Victoria was no longer part of her life, and Marina was fine with that. She turned and left the auditorium, embracing Julia with Gabriel in her arms, and the certainty that she had finally found her place in the world, a place where her voice mattered, where her name shone, where she was no longer anyone's shadow. She was her own light, intense, undeniable, unforgettable. The repercussions of the lecture were immediate and overwhelming. In the following days, the video of Marina's presentation went viral on social media. Thousands of shares, hundreds of thousands of views, and emotional comments from women who identified with the story. Phoenix Consultancy began receiving proposals from all over the country. Companies wanted partnerships. Universities wanted Marina to teach courses. Television programs wanted to interview her. Marina could barely process everything that was happening. Julia took on the role of managing the agenda and filtering the most relevant opportunities. Edward, who had watched the lecture from the audience, was even more convinced that he had made the right investment. He scheduled a meeting with Marina to discuss the next steps for expansion. But this time, the meeting would not be in EB Capital's formal office. It would be in a quiet cafe in Notting Hill, something more personal, more human. Marina arrived at the cafe with Gabriel. The baby was bigger now, more alert, and loved to observe everything around him. Edward was already there, drinking coffee and reading a newspaper. When he saw Marina, he stood up and smiled. There was something different about that smile. It was genuine, warm. Marina felt something strange in her chest, but ignored it. It was not the time for emotional complications. She had a company to run, a legal battle underway, and a baby about to be born. Edward asked how she was feeling with all the sudden exposure. Marina was honest. She said it was frightening, but at the same time liberating, that for the first time in her life, she felt she was in control of her own narrative. Edward agreed. He said that when he went through the betrayal by his partners years ago, he also felt that mix of fear and freedom, and that the best decision he had made was not to hide, but to face everything head-on. The conversation flowed naturally. They talked about business, about expansion plans, about the possibility of opening Phoenix branches in other major cities. But they also talked about personal things. Edward said he had been divorced for 5 years, that he had a 12-year-old daughter who lived with her mother, but whom he saw every weekend. He said the divorce had been painful, but necessary because he and his ex-wife simply were no longer compatible. Marina listened carefully, and for the first time, shared details about her own divorce process, which was still ongoing. Robert was trying to make everything difficult. He claimed Marina was not financially capable of caring for Gabriel, that she was emotionally unstable, that the environment she lived in, at a friend's house, was not suitable for a child. Marina's lawyer, Dr. Henry, was preparing a robust defense with all the documents proving Marina's mental health, her growing financial capacity with Phoenix, and especially the evidence that Robert had committed adultery and had abusively expelled her from home. Edward listened to everything and was indignant. He said he knew good lawyers specializing in custody cases and could recommend them if Marina needed. She thanked him but said she trusted Dr. Henry. What she really needed was emotional strength to endure the strain of the process. Edward looked at her with an intensity Marina didn't expect and said something that took her by surprise. "You are the strongest woman I know, Marina, and it's not just strength in the sense of enduring pain, it's strength in the sense of transforming pain into something beautiful, into something that helps other people. That is rare. Very rare." Marina felt her face flush. She looked away and thanked him, trying to hide the effect those words had had. Gabriel, as if sensing the tension, began to whimper. Marina picked him up and said she needed to go. Edward insisted on accompanying her to the car. On the way, he asked if she would like to have dinner with him sometime when she had time. Marina hesitated. She didn't know if it was appropriate. They were business partners, but there was something in Edward's eyes that made her want to say yes. So she did. "Yes, I'd like that." The following week was intense. Marina had meetings with new clients, interviews for podcasts and magazines, and preparation sessions with Dr. Henry for Gabriel's custody hearing, which would take place soon. But amidst all this, she couldn't stop thinking about dinner with Edward. Was it just a business meeting? Or was it something more? And if it was something more, was she ready for it? She had just come out of a devastating marriage. She was pregnant. She had 1,000 responsibilities. Would it be fair to Edward to start something at that moment? Julia noticed Marina's restlessness, and one evening, while they were having tea in the living room, directly asked what was happening. Marina told her about Edward's invitation. Julia smiled and said it was obvious there was chemistry between them, that she had noticed it since the first meeting, and that Marina deserved to be happy. She deserved to experience true love based on respect and mutual admiration. Marina sighed. She said she was scared of getting hurt again, scared of trusting. Julia held her hand and said that fear was normal, but she couldn't let fear stop her from living. The dinner took place in a cozy restaurant in Mayfair. Edward had chosen a discreet place, away from the spotlight. Marina dressed elegantly but comfortably, considering her 9 months of pregnancy. When she arrived, Edward was already there and stood up as soon as he saw her. He pulled out the chair for her, something Robert had never done. Small gestures that made all the difference. The evening was light, pleasant. They talked about everything but work. Edward told stories from his childhood, how he grew up in a simple family in rural Yorkshire and came to London at 20 with nothing and built an empire with hard work and great determination. Marina shared her own memories of how she had always been the quiet friend, the one who preferred to observe rather than be observed, and how that had shaped her life in ways she was only now beginning to understand. At the end of the evening, Edward walked her to her car. Before saying goodbye, he held Marina's hand and said he would like to see her again, not as business partners, but as two people who enjoyed each other's company. Marina felt her heart race. She looked at him and saw sincerity. There were no games. There were no ulterior motives, just a man genuinely interested in her. She smiled and said she would like that too. In the following days, Marina and Edward began to talk daily. Messages in the morning, calls at night. Edward asked how she was, how Gabriel was, if she needed anything. These weren't empty conversations, they were conversations of real connection. Marina began to allow herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. She began to allow herself to like someone without fear, without restrictions, without the need to diminish herself. It was during this period that Dr. Henry contacted her with news about the lawsuit against Victoria. The evidence had been presented, and Victoria's defense had no way to contest it. The metadata, the emails, the presentations, everything pointed to Marina as the true creator of the strategies that put Alston Strategies at the top. The judge responsible for the case had requested a forensic analysis, and the result confirmed everything. Victoria had improperly appropriated Marina's work for years. Dr. Henry recommended that Marina make the case public, not for revenge but to protect her reputation and ensure that other companies would not try to do the same. Marina agreed, but she wanted to do it the right way. She prepared an official statement with legal and respectful language, exposing the facts without personal attacks. She published it on her website, on her social media, and sent it to the main business news outlets in the country. The repercussions were immediate. In a few hours, the case was on all news portals. Victoria Alston, the celebrated CEO of Alston Strategies, was unmasked as a fraud. Clients began to cancel contracts, investors withdrew support, partners broke agreements. The company Marina had helped build collapsed in a matter of days. And Victoria, who had always loved the spotlight, was now pursued by journalists wanting answers. Marina felt no pleasure in Victoria's downfall. She felt only a sense of justice restored. The world finally knew the truth, and she could move forward without that weight on her shoulders. Robert, in turn, also began to feel the consequences. Colleagues avoided him. The architectural firm where he worked requested his resignation, claiming that his public image was harming the company. And Victoria, who had promised to stand by him, disappeared as soon as the problems began. Gabriel's custody hearing was scheduled for a rainy Monday in February. Marina was 40 weeks pregnant. The baby could be born at any moment. Dr. Henry asked her to go to court anyway, because her presence was essential. Edward offered to accompany her, and Marina accepted. Having someone by her side at that moment meant more than he imagined. At the courthouse, Marina saw Robert for the first time since the night she had been expelled from home. He was thin, pale, with deep, dark circles under his eyes. He avoided her gaze. Marina felt a pang of pity, but soon remembered everything he had done. How he had humiliated her, called her invisible, expelled her from home pregnant and with a sick baby. The pity disappeared. The judge heard both sides. Robert tried to argue that Marina lacked financial stability, but Dr. Henry presented Phoenix's bank statements, showing that the company was profitable and growing. Robert claimed Marina was emotionally unstable, but Dr. Henry presented psychological reports attesting to Marina's full mental and emotional capacity. And when Robert tried to use the fact that Marina was living at a friend's house as an argument for housing instability, Dr. Henry revealed that Marina had already rented her own two-bedroom apartment in Notting Hill and would be moving in the following week. The judge was direct in her decision. Gabriel's custody would go to Marina. Robert would have the right to supervised visits on weekends and would have to pay child support commensurate with his income. In addition, the judge made a point of reprimanding Robert for having expelled his pregnant wife from home, an act she considered cruel and inhumane. Marina left the courthouse with Gabriel in her arms, Dr. Henry by her side, and Edward right behind. She cried tears of relief. Finally, that battle was over. That same night, Marina began to feel the first contractions. She called Julia, who immediately took her to the hospital. Edward, who had learned about the contractions, appeared at the hospital half an hour later. He stayed in the waiting room with Julia, waiting for news. Hours passed. Dawn arrived, and at 5 in the morning, Marina gave birth to a baby girl. Healthy, perfect, with dark eyes and the strong cry of someone arriving in the world ready to conquer it. Marina held her daughter in her arms and cried. She cried with happiness, with exhaustion, with gratitude. Everything she had been through, all the pain, all the struggle, it had all been worth it to get to this point. Julia entered the room, emotional, and hugged Marina. Edward entered shortly after, with a bouquet of flowers and a shy smile. He asked if he could meet the baby. Marina nodded yes. He approached, looked at the girl, and said she was beautiful. Marina noticed something in his eyes: tenderness, care, love. It was at that moment that Marina realized something important. This man, who had entered her life as an investor, as a business partner, had become so much more. He was there at 5 in the morning in a hospital, holding flowers, looking at her newborn daughter with the same tenderness a father would look. And Marina felt that perhaps, just perhaps, she was ready to allow herself to love again. In the following days, while Marina recovered in the hospital, Phoenix continued to grow. Julia temporarily took over management with Marina's remote supervision. New contracts were closed, the team was expanded, and a large corporate group contacted them, proposing a national partnership to bring the Phoenix model to all major cities across the UK. It was everything Marina had dreamed of, and it was happening. Edward visited Marina every day at the hospital. He brought Gabriel to see his little sister. He brought homemade food because he knew Marina didn't like hospital food. He spent hours talking with her about everything and nothing, and on one of those afternoons, while Marina was breastfeeding the baby and Gabriel was playing on the floor, Edward held Marina's hand and said something that completely surprised her. "Marina, I know the timing isn't perfect. I know you've just had a daughter, that you're in the middle of 1,000 things, that it might not be the ideal moment. But I can't hold this in anymore. I've fallen in love with you, with your strength, with your intelligence, with the way you transformed pain into purpose. And I don't just want to be your business partner. I want to be by your side, as a companion, as someone who admires you, respects you, and wants to build something real with you." Marina was speechless. She looked at him, saw the sincerity in his eyes, and felt her heart race. It wasn't fear, it was anticipation. It was the possibility of a true new beginning. She took a deep breath and said she also felt something for him. That she was scared, yes, but that she was willing to try. Edward smiled, a huge smile, and leaned in to kiss her. It was a soft, careful kiss, full of silent promises. When Marina was discharged from the hospital, Edward helped her settle into the new apartment. He set up the crib, organized Gabriel's clothes, prepared the baby's room. And that day, Marina realized something. For the first time in her life, she had a real family, not a family based on appearances or conveniences, but a family based on genuine love, mutual respect, and real partnership. The little girl was registered with the name Sophia Phoenix, a name that carried all the symbolism of rebirth, overcoming, transformation. And Marina knew that her daughter would grow up seeing her mother not as a shadow, but as a complete, visible, strong woman. A woman who, even after falling, managed to fly higher than ever. The first few months with Sophia were intense, but Marina had never felt so complete. Gabriel, at 2 years old, adored his little sister and constantly wanted to help change diapers, give her bottles, and sing her to sleep. Edward became a constant presence in their lives. He spent every day at Marina's apartment, had dinner with the family, helped with the children, and gradually became a father figure to Gabriel and Sophia. Phoenix continued to grow exponentially. With the national partnership they had secured, the consultancy now had representatives in 12 major UK cities. The mentorship program for entrepreneurial mothers had already helped over 5,000 women structure their businesses, and the support network for women victims of emotional and financial abuse had become a national reference, even being mentioned in bills before Parliament. Marina was constantly invited to events, lectures, and interviews. Her story of overcoming had inspired thousands of women across the country, but she made sure never to forget where she came from. In all her speeches, she always mentioned Julia, the friend who welcomed her when no one else did, and she always ended by saying that no woman should go through that alone, that it was everyone's responsibility to create networks of support, solidarity, and true sisterhood. It was on an August afternoon, when Sophia was 6 months old, that Marina received an unexpected call. It was from the hospital where Sophia was born. The nurse on the other end of the line said she needed to speak with her urgently about a routine test they had performed on the baby shortly after birth. Marina felt her heart race. Could something be wrong with Sophia? The nurse asked her to come to the hospital personally to talk. Marina left the children with Julia and went immediately. She arrived at the hospital with trembling hands. She was directed to a room where the nurse and a doctor were waiting for her. She sat down, prepared for the worst, but what they heard was not about illness, it was about paternity. The doctor explained that due to an internal hospital protocol, they had performed routine genetic tests on Sophia, and something had caught their attention. The baby's blood type was not compatible with Robert's, who was listed as the father on Marina's prenatal chart. Marina was confused. She didn't understand what that meant. The doctor explained carefully. He said that based on the dates and test results, there was a very high possibility that Robert was not Sophia's biological father, and that, if Marina had been involved with someone else around the time of conception, it would be important to do a paternity test to confirm. Marina felt the world spin. She mentally did the math. When she was expelled from home, she was 7 months pregnant. But now, recalling the dates more carefully, she realized there might have been an error in the initial calculation. She and Robert had been intimate for the last time almost 3 weeks before the discovery of the betrayal. And she had met Edward shortly after. They had quickly become close, and that night after dinner, at the restaurant when he took her home, there was a moment, a kiss that deepened, a hug that intensified, and yes, they had surrendered to that moment, driven by the genuine connection they felt. Marina had never considered the possibility that Sophia could be Edward's daughter. She had simply assumed she was Robert's daughter, because that's what made sense at the time. But now, with that revelation, everything changed. She thanked the doctor, asked for a copy of the tests, and left the hospital stunned. She needed to talk to Edward. She called him and asked to meet somewhere. Quiet. Edward, sensing the urgency in her voice, cancelled all his afternoon meetings and went to Marina's apartment. She told him everything. About the call from the hospital, about the tests, about the possibility of Sophia being his daughter. Edward was silent for a few seconds, then a smile formed on his lips. It wasn't a smile of surprise. It was a smile of pure happiness. Marina, I don't know if Sophia is biologically my daughter, but I already love her as if she were. I already love Gabriel as if he were my son, and I already love you, in a way I never thought I could love again. If the tests confirm that I am Sophia's biological father, I will be the happiest man in the world. But even if they don't confirm it, nothing changes. I want to be in your lives, forever. Marina cried. She hugged Edward tightly and cried with relief, with happiness, with gratitude. They did the paternity test the following week. The result came in 10 days. And it confirmed. Edward was Sophia's biological father. The baby Marina thought she was carrying from a destroyed marriage was, in fact, the fruit of a genuine love that was just beginning. It was as if the universe had conspired to give her a complete fresh start, not just professional, not just emotional, but also familial. Edward cried when he received the result. He picked Sophia up in his arms and said she was the most beautiful gift life could have given him. Marina watched the scene and felt that finally, after so much suffering, she was living the happy ending she had always deserved. Robert was informed of the test result. His reaction was one of relief, because it meant he would have no responsibility for Sophia. But it was also one of bitterness, because he realized that Marina had moved on, had built a new life, and he had been left behind. The following months were spent preparing for a big event. Phoenix would inaugurate its own headquarters, a 3-story building in Notting Hill, which would not only be the consultancy's office, but also a support center for women entrepreneurs with co-working spaces, an auditorium for lectures, and even a daycare center so mothers could work while their children were safe and well cared for. The inauguration was scheduled for a sunny Saturday in November. Hundreds of people confirmed their presence, clients, partners, investors, and especially the women Phoenix had helped over the past year. Marina was nervous. It would be a huge event, broadcast live on social media, and she would give a speech she had been preparing for weeks. On the morning of the event, as she was getting ready, Edward entered the room with Gabriel and Sophia. The children were dressed in party clothes. Edward was elegant in a navy blue suit. He looked at Marina with that gaze she knew so well, full of love, admiration, pride. And then, to her surprise, he knelt down. "Marina, since I met you, my life has gained a meaning I didn't know was missing. You showed me what true courage is, what it is to transform pain into purpose, what it is to love without fear. I want to be by your side forever. I want to wake up every day next to you. I want to build a family with you. I want to be the man who supports you, who admires you, who celebrates you. Marina, will you marry me?" Marina looked at Edward, then at Gabriel, who clapped his hands, without fully understanding what was happening, then at Sophia, who slept peacefully in Julia's arms, who had entered the room at the exact moment. She looked at Julia, who was crying and smiling at the same time, and she looked again at Edward. The answer was obvious. It was yes. It had always been yes since the moment he showed that he saw her for who she really was. A complete woman. Visible. Enough. Yes, Edward. 1,000 times yes. Edward placed the ring on her finger, stood up, and kissed her. Julia applauded, Gabriel applauded, and Sophia woke up and started crying, as if complaining about having missed the moment. Everyone laughed. It was the most imperfect and most perfect family at the same time. It was real. It was true. It was theirs. They arrived at the event together. Edward held Sophia. Gabriel held Marina's hand. Julia walked beside them, emotional, being the unofficial godmother of that whole story. When they entered the Phoenix building, they were greeted by applause. The space was beautiful, carefully decorated, with photos of all the women Phoenix had helped, forming a giant mural at the entrance. Marina felt her eyes well up. This was not just a company, it was a movement. It was a silent revolution of women who refused to be invisible. The event began with a musical performance, then some emotional testimonials from women who had rebuilt their lives with Phoenix's support, and then it was time for Marina's speech. She walked onto the stage, adjusted the microphone, looked at the audience of almost 500 people, and the cameras transmitting everything live. She took a deep breath and began. "I didn't rebuild myself for revenge. I rebuilt myself to exist. When I was expelled from home, pregnant, with my sick son in my arms on a rainy night, I thought that was the end. I thought I would never be able to get back up. But I was wrong. That wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a journey of self-discovery, healing, rebirth. And today, standing here before all of you, I can say it was worth it. Every tear, every sleepless night, every fear faced, it was worth it, because today I am who I always should have been, visible, complete, free. And I want all the women listening to me to know that you can too. You can get up from the ground, you can fly, you can be reborn. Even with wounded feet, even with a broken heart, even thinking there's no strength left. You can. And Phoenix is here to prove it every day." The audience erupted in applause. Marina came down from the stage and was embraced by dozens of women, all crying, all thanking her, all saying she had changed their lives. Edward hugged her from behind and whispered in her ear that he was proud. Julia cried non-stop, and in the middle of the crowd Marina saw a familiar face. It was Mrs. Caroline. Her former mother-in-law was there at the back of the auditorium with an expression of deep regret. Marina felt her stomach clench. She hadn't spoken to Mrs. Caroline since that terrible night. The woman approached slowly as if afraid of being expelled. She stopped in front of Marina and with a choked voice said she needed to apologize. "Marina, I made a mistake. A big mistake. I treated you horribly. I threw you out of the house when you most needed support. I believed the lies of my son and that woman. I was blind. I was cruel. And I regret it every day. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I acknowledge my mistake and that I am very, very sorry." Marina looked at Mrs. Caroline. She saw the wrinkles that weren't there before. She saw the tired eyes full of remorse. And she felt that if she wanted to, she could hold a grudge, she could turn her back, she could make Mrs. Caroline feel the same rejection Marina had felt that night. But then she remembered what she had said in her speech, that she hadn't rebuilt herself for revenge, that she had rebuilt herself to exist, and part of existing fully was not carrying unnecessary burdens, it was liberating herself from the past. "Mrs. Caroline, I heard what you said, and I appreciate your courage in coming here. But forgiveness is not something that happens immediately. It's a process, and I'm still in that process. Perhaps one day we can talk properly, build something new. But today is not that day. Today is the day to celebrate what I built, not to revisit what destroyed me. Mrs. Caroline nodded, tears streaming down her face, and walked away. Marina took a deep breath. She felt light. There was no anger. There was no bitterness. Only the awareness that she was in control of her own narrative, her own time, her own choices, and that no one else would have power over her. The event ended in the late afternoon. Marina was exhausted but happy. Edward suggested they take a walk around the city before heading home. Marina agreed. They left the children with Julia and walked hand in hand through the streets of Notting Hill. They walked aimlessly, enjoying the orange sunset that painted the London sky. And then Marina saw a store. It was a luxury store she always passed by but had never dared to enter. Edward noticed her gaze and asked if she wanted to go in. Marina hesitated. She said she had always dreamed of owning a bag from that store, but had never had the courage to buy one. Edward smiled and said that now she had not only the courage, but also the right to fulfill that dream. They entered together. Marina chose a beautiful, classic leather bag. She paid with her own card. And as she left the store with the bag in her hand, she felt something powerful. It wasn't about the bag. It was about the symbol, about independence, about the fact that now she could choose, she could exist, she could shine. She looked at the sky, now cloudless, with the sun setting and painting everything golden. She smiled. Edward asked what she was thinking about. Marina replied that she was thinking about how strange life was, how a year ago she was on the ground, destroyed, without hope. And now she was there with a man who truly loved her, with 2 healthy children, with a successful company, with purpose, with a voice, with visibility. She was thinking about how she had been reborn. Edward pulled her into a hug and said she hadn't been reborn alone, that all those who loved her had been reborn with her. That Julia, that Gabriel, that Sophia, that he himself, all had transformed alongside her. That was what Phoenix meant: collective rebirth, shared transformation, love that heals and rebuilds. Marina rested her head on Edward's shoulder and whispered, "No one destroys a phoenix, it burns and then it flies." And there, on that London street, beside the man she loved, after facing the greatest storm of her life, Marina finally allowed herself to believe that she deserved it, to believe that she was enough, to believe that her name, her voice, her light had always been there, just waiting for the right moment to shine. And now they shone, intensely, undeniably, forever. Dear listeners, we hope Marina's story has deeply touched your hearts. If you were moved by this journey of overcoming, rebirth and courage, please subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment stood out to you the most. Was it Marina's strength when she was expelled from home? Her rebirth through Phoenix? The true love she found with Edward? Every day we bring intense and real stories like this, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul and celebrate the capacity we all have to reinvent ourselves, even after the greatest falls. Your presence here means a lot to us. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode, with another story that will stir your emotions and make you believe that it's always possible to start over.